Welcome. This is an introduction to Minnesota assessments from the Minnesota Department of Education, the Division of Academic Standards, Instruction, and Assessment. We are so glad that you have agreed to help us out on our MCA review committees. In this introduction to Minnesota assessments, we focus on 10 commitments to equity from MDE. Specifically, we are looking at measuring what matters and monitoring the implementation of standards. These may be obvious because, of course, we're focusing on assessing students on the MCAs and the alternate MCAs. But while we're doing that, we need to make sure we're prioritizing equity. And to do so, we need to also improve the conditions for learning as we communicate and support students and teachers in the implementation of these standards. This video will provide you with a brief overview of the Minnesota assessment system. Minnesota has several assessments that are delivered statewide and that MDE is responsible for. Minnesota requires enrolled EL students to participate in the English Language Proficiency ELP assessments, Access or the WIDA alternate access. In addition, every enrolled Minnesota student is required to take either the Minnesota Comprehensive Assessments, MCAs, or the alternate MCAs each year. Note the alternate MCAs used to be called MTAS. The alternate access and the alternate MCAs are given to students with the most significant cognitive disabilities. There is also the federal assessment, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, NAEP, that is administered to a sampling of schools in each state. The Access and Alternate Access assessments aligned to WIDA English Language Development Standards, which were adopted by Minnesota. The MCA and MTAS are aligned to the Minnesota Academic Standards in Science, English Language Arts, and Mathematics. While the required assessments are all based on standards, they serve different purposes, and therefore the results produced must be used differently. The Access assessments inform student-level decisions for English learners, like determining EL services. The MCAs and the alternate MCAs, or MTAS, on the other hand, are designed for system-level decision-making, like school or district decisions regarding curriculum and instruction for the institution as a whole. The purpose of the MCA and MTAS is to help understand implementation of the standards at the school, district, and state levels. In order for a test to inform specific individual student academic needs, it may need as many as 200 questions. Instead of lengthening the assessment, results of these statewide assessments are meant to be taken in aggregate, meaning they're meant to show us information about groups of students. Aggregate data provides insights into when and where systems are successfully implementing the standards and are in need of more successful implementation to improve academic achievement and equity. The data from the state is collected only once per year and shows only one part of the whole story. Data and information are collected by the district in abundance at the school and classroom levels. The sources of information should be relied upon more heavily when making educational decisions at the individual student level, as they include multiple data points for each student. The Math and Reading MCAs are computer adaptive tests, known as CATs. Science MCAs are fixed form tests, which are not CATs. The alternate MCAs in all three content areas are also fixed form tests. Now we are going to watch a few video clips explaining how the different MCAs are administered. The first clip explains how a math MCA works in showing how to measure a student's ability. Then you'll have an explanation on how the reading MCA works with the reading passages.
The mathematics MCA test items are contained in an item bank that holds more than 4,000 test items. The test items are identified by difficulty level, ranging from easy to difficult. Each student will begin the test with a test item of average difficulty. The student answers the item, and the response is scored. If the response is incorrect, the CAT algorithm selects a slightly easier question for the student to answer next. If the response is correct, the CAT algorithm selects a slightly more difficult question for the student to answer next. These steps repeat for each question until the required number of questions, as indicated by the test specifications, have been administered. The test item selection and scoring process is applied to all students taking a computer adaptive test. As a result, each student's test is unique.
The Reading MCA is divided into multiple sections, each of which is composed of one or more passages and their set of items. The Reading MCA evaluates a student's overall response to a passage set rather than an individual item to determine the next passage set the student will receive. Each student begins the test with a passage set of average difficulty. A passage set is a passage and a series of predetermined test items associated with the passage. The student then answers the test items associated with the passage. The CAT algorithm scores the set as a whole and selects a slightly easier or more difficult passage set based on the student's responses to the first set. As the student progresses through the test, the CAT algorithm continues to select an appropriate passage set based on the results of the previous passage set. This process continues until the student has completed the designated number of passage sets and test items. The test item selection and scoring process is applied to all students taking a reading computer adaptive test. Students will advance through the test at their own pace and receive passage sets of different difficulty based on individual performance. As a result, each student's test is unique.
For the CAT to best measure a student's ability, the computer must pull questions that not only align to a specific benchmark, but must match the current measure of a student's ability. To do this, the item bank needs difficult items, easy items, and everything in between for each benchmark. So why do we use a CAT for the Math MCA? First of all, it is required by Minnesota law. Second, a CAT can provide more precision in measuring a student's math ability by using fewer questions because it adjusts to provide questions at the student's math ability. This way the test can be shorter. And who doesn't want a shorter test? Now watch this short video clip explaining how a fixed form test works. The video is specific to the science MCAs, and the alternative MCA is very similar.
The Science MCA is an online fixed form test, which means the content of the forms is determined prior to the testing window. There are several variations of the test that differ only in the spiraled sequence of the scenarios and in the field-tested scenarios inserted into the test form. A fixed form test uses the same scenarios and items for all students. However, each student's performance on the test will result in a unique score.
This table shows the timelines for transition to the MCA4 for each subject area. Science and reading have both fully implemented MCA4s now. Math will follow and is anticipated to start in spring of 2028. This table shows a similar path for transitioning from the M test to the alternate MCA. Again, science and reading have already begun the alternate MCA, and math will start in spring of 2028. Thank you. This concludes the Introduction to Minnesota Assessments video. If you have any questions, please post them in the forum on the Canvas page or send them to mde.panels@state.mn.us. Thank you.